Obsession becomes protection when the only way to ensure someone's safety is to own everything around them. Won Shik-kyung learned that lesson in Portland, Oregon, when he realized that keeping Essence Perez and her daughter Maya safe required eliminating every variable he couldn't control, including purchasing the entire apartment building where they lived, evicting every tenant who posed potential risk, and restructuring their entire neighborhood to create security perimeter around two people who didn't even know he existed. It started 6 months earlier during what should have been routine surveillance operation. Won Shik ran Korean organized crime operations throughout the Pacific Northwest. Gambling, loan sharking, import operations that moved everything from luxury goods to controlled substances. He was 38, had built his organization over 15 years through strategic ruthlessness that made rivals cautious about challenging his territory. He maintained strict operational security protocols, avoided patterns, varied his movements, never became predictable enough that rivals or law enforcement could anticipate his locations. One of those security protocols involved conducting business from different locations throughout Portland rather than maintaining fixed headquarters. He'd rent conference rooms, use private dining rooms at restaurants he controlled, meet in vehicles or public spaces where surveillance was difficult. On a Tuesday in March, he was conducting business meeting in a coffee shop in Portland's southeast neighborhood. Area gentrifying rapidly, mix of longtime residents and newer arrivals, the kind of transitional space where his presence wouldn't attract particular notice. The meeting was about loan collections, reviewing accounts, discussing which debtors required pressure and which could be given extensions, making strategic decisions about resource allocation. Won Shik was reviewing files when someone walked past his table. He glanced up automatically. Security awareness meant noting everyone in proximity. A black woman, maybe late 20s, carrying a child who appeared to be about 4 years old. The woman looked tired, wore scrubs suggesting she'd just finished a medical shift. The child was animated, talking about something that had happened at preschool. They sat at a nearby table. The woman ordered coffee and a cookie for the child, clearly treating this as special occasion rather than routine expense. Won Shik returned his attention to the meeting, made his decisions about collections, prepared to leave. Then he heard raised voices. A man at another table was arguing with the barista about his order, becoming increasingly aggressive despite the barista's attempts to de-escalate. "I said I wanted soy milk, not regular milk. Are you stupid? Can you not follow simple instructions?" The barista was visibly distressed. "I'm sorry, sir. I'll remake your drink." "You'll remake it and you'll refund the original. And you'll apologize for wasting my time with your incompetence." Other customers were uncomfortable but not intervening. The aggressive customer was large, clearly agitated, creating situation where confrontation felt dangerous. The woman in scrubs stood up. "Sir, she apologized and she's remaking your drink. There's no need to verbally abuse someone over a coffee order." The aggressive man turned his anger toward her. "Mind your own business. This doesn't concern you. It concerns everyone here when you're creating hostile environment over a minor mistake. Accept the apology and the remake and stop harassing someone who's just trying to do their job." "Who the hell are you to tell me?" He moved toward her aggressively. The child started crying. Other customers pulled back, clearly afraid of the escalating confrontation. Won Shik stood smoothly, positioned himself between the aggressive man and the woman. "The lady asked you politely to accept the barista's apology and your remade drink. I'm asking you less politely, take your drink and leave, or I'll remove you from the establishment." The man looked at Won Shik, saw something in his posture or expression that suggested violence was an available option, not just threat, and backed down. "Whatever. This place is trash anyway." He left without his drink. The barista was shaking, clearly rattled by the confrontation. The woman in scrubs looked at Won Shik with obvious gratitude. "Thank you. I wasn't sure what to do when he started coming toward me." "You were trying to protect the barista. That was brave." "It was stupid. I have a 4-year-old daughter and I just confronted an aggressive stranger over a coffee order. Not exactly smart parenting. Brave and smart aren't always the same thing. But teaching your daughter to stand up for people being mistreated is a valuable lesson." The child had stopped crying, was looking at Won-shik with obvious curiosity. Are you a superhero? You made the mean man leave. Won-shik smiled despite himself. Not a superhero. Just someone who doesn't like watching people get bullied. Thank you, the woman said again. I'm Essence. This is my daughter Maya. Won-shik. I'm glad I could help. He returned to his table, finished his meeting, left the coffee shop. He should have forgotten the interaction entirely. Brief good deed in public space, no ongoing relevance to his life or operations. But he found himself thinking about Essence over the following days. Her willingness to intervene despite obvious risk. Her daughter's innocent question about superheroes. The tired determination in her expression suggesting she was working hard to provide for her child. He told himself the interest was just residual from the confrontation, that it would fade with time. It didn't fade. It intensified. He found himself researching Essence Perez through his organization's information resources. Learned she was a nurse working at Oregon Health and Science University, single mother raising Maya alone, living in a modest apartment building in Southeast Portland. He had no legitimate reason to know any of this information. No operational justification for investigating someone he'd met briefly at a coffee shop. But he investigated anyway, telling himself it was just curiosity about someone who'd impressed him. Then he learned something that made casual interest transform into active concern. The apartment building where Essence lived, the Riverside Apartments on SE Division, had serious problems. The building was owned by an investment group that was milking it for profit while deferring maintenance. Mold problems, heating failures, security issues including broken locks and inadequate lighting in common areas. Worse, several units were rented to people with connections to rival criminal organizations. Drug dealers, gang members, people whose presence created danger for legitimate residents like Essence and Maya. Won-shik told himself this wasn't his problem. Essence Perez wasn't part of his operations, wasn't under his protection, wasn't someone he had responsibility for beyond brief moment of helping in a coffee shop. But the thought of her and Maya living in that building, with inadequate security, dangerous neighbors, an ownership group that didn't care about tenant safety, made him increasingly uncomfortable. He started conducting surveillance. Not on Essence directly, but on the building and the neighborhood. Identifying threats, documenting problems, understanding the security vulnerabilities that created risk for residents. What he found was worse than he'd initially assessed. The building wasn't just poorly maintained, it was actively dangerous. Multiple units were used for drug operations. Gang activity in the area was increasing. A woman had been assaulted in the building's parking lot 2 weeks ago. Won-shik made a decision he knew was crossing line from professional interest into personal obsession. He was going to eliminate the threats to Essence and Maya's safety. The most efficient way to eliminate those threats was to control the building itself. He contacted the investment group that owned the Riverside Apartments. Made an offer to purchase the property, substantially above market value, cash sale, quick close. We're not looking to sell, the investment group's representative said. The property is profitable for us as rental income. I'm offering 40% above your purchase price. Close in 30 days. All cash, no financing contingencies. Why would you pay that much for a property that's worth significantly less? Because I have uses for the location that justify the premium. Are you selling or not? They were selling. Within 48 hours, Won-shik's shell companies had executed purchase agreement for the Riverside Apartments. He owned the building where Essence and Maya lived. Now he could address the security problems directly. His first action was evicting the criminal tenants. Not through legal process, that would take months. Through direct action that made it clear they needed to leave immediately or face consequences. His people visited each problematic unit. Made it clear that new ownership didn't tolerate drug operations or gang activity. Offered relocation payments for immediate departure. Most left without confrontation, understanding that new ownership had resources and willingness to enforce compliance that previous owners had lacked. Within 2 weeks, every criminal tenant was gone. The building's security profile improved dramatically. Next, Won-shik authorized complete renovation. fixed the mold problems, upgraded heating systems, installed proper security cameras, improved lighting, functioning locks, security personnel for the building entrance. He did all of this without informing residents about new ownership. The improvements were presented as previous ownership finally addressing deferred maintenance. Essence noticed the changes. One chick monitored her reaction through security cameras he'd installed, told himself he was just confirming residents appreciated the improvements, not that he was specifically watching her. She seemed relieved by the security upgrades, grateful that dangerous neighbors were gone, pleased that the building was finally being properly maintained. She had no idea that all of it, the purchase, the evictions, the renovations, was being done specifically to ensure her safety. One chick told himself this was adequate intervention. He'd eliminated immediate threats, improved the building's security, created safe environment for Essence and Maya. But then he started thinking about threats beyond just the building. The neighborhood had problems, gang activity, drug dealing, property crimes that created ambient danger for residents. If he really wanted Essence and Maya safe, he needed to address those threats too. Over the next 3 months, one chick systematically bought or leased properties throughout the neighborhood surrounding the Riverside apartments. Not obviously. Purchases were made through various shell companies that obscured his involvement. But the effect was that he controlled significant portion of the neighborhood, which gave him leverage to address the criminal activity that created danger. He pressured drug dealers to operate elsewhere, worked with gang leadership to move their territories away from the area around Essence's building, applied enough pressure that criminal activity in the neighborhood declined measurably. He also improved the neighborhood infrastructure, funded better street lighting, supported local business development, created conditions that attracted legitimate activity and displaced criminal operations. All of this was happening without Essence having any awareness. She was just experiencing neighborhood improvement, less crime, better lighting, more community investment. She didn't know it was all being orchestrated by someone who decided her safety was worth restructuring an entire neighborhood. 6 months after first seeing her at the coffee shop, one chick had spent millions of dollars and extensive operational resources creating security perimeter around someone who didn't know he existed beyond brief interaction where he'd helped during a confrontation. His underboss Minho finally confronted him about the obsession. "Sir, we need to discuss the resources being allocated to the Southeast Portland operations." "What about them?" "We've purchased an apartment building, bought or leased a dozen properties in the surrounding area, deployed security personnel, made deals with rival gangs to move their operations, all focused on a 6-block radius around one specific building. That's unusual resource allocation that requires explanation. The neighborhood is strategically valuable. The neighborhood is strategically worthless for our operations. We don't run businesses there, we don't have operational interests there. The only thing in that area that we care about is one specific apartment building." "Why?" One chick knew he couldn't avoid explaining. "There's a woman and her daughter living in that building. I'm ensuring their safety." "One woman? We've spent millions of dollars securing a neighborhood to protect one woman who isn't part of our operations?" "Yes." "Why? Is she an asset? Is she providing intelligence? Is there operational justification I'm not aware of?" "She's not an asset. She's just someone I met briefly who impressed me. Someone I decided deserves protection." Minho stared at him. "You're restructuring an entire neighborhood to protect someone you met briefly? That's not operational security, that's obsession. Call it whatever you want. She's being protected and the resources are being allocated appropriately. Does she know? Does this woman have any awareness that you've bought her building and restructured her neighborhood specifically to keep her safe?" "No. And she won't know unless there's a reason to tell her." "This is concerning, sir. Obsessive focus on protecting someone who doesn't know you're protecting them suggests unhealthy attachment." "It's not unhealthy. It's strategic protection of someone I've decided is worth protecting. That's within my authority as head of this organization." "It's within your authority, but it's not strategic. It's personal in ways that create vulnerabilities. If rivals discover you've allocated this many resources to protecting one woman, they'll target her to hurt you. Then rivals won't discover it. Maintain operational security around the Southeast Portland operations. No one discusses the actual purpose beyond standard neighborhood control activities. Minho left the meeting clearly concerned, but Won-shik didn't care. He'd made his decision. Essence and Maya were under his protection whether they knew it or not, whether it was operationally strategic or just personal obsession. He would keep them safe regardless of the cost or the concerns about his judgment. What he didn't anticipate was that maintaining that protection would eventually require revealing himself to someone who had no idea she'd been living in security perimeter created specifically for her. Subscribe to see what happens when protection becomes obsession, when a mafia boss spends millions securing a neighborhood for someone who doesn't know he exists, and the moment when hidden protection must become visible to prevent the one thing he's been trying to stop. Comment where you're watching from, and tell me, would you want someone restructuring your entire neighborhood to protect you without your knowledge? This story is just beginning. The situation that forced Won-shik to reveal himself came 8 months after he'd first seen Essence at the coffee shop. One of his rivals, the Volkov organization operating out of Seattle, had been investigating Won-shik's activities in Portland, trying to identify vulnerabilities or operational weaknesses they could exploit. Their intelligence gathering identified the unusual pattern: significant resources allocated to Southeast Portland neighborhood with no obvious operational return. Properties purchased, security deployed, neighborhood restructured for unclear purposes. Volkov decided to investigate what was so valuable in that neighborhood that Won-shik was investing millions to control it. Their people conducted surveillance, identified that Won-shik's security was specifically focused on the Riverside apartments. Traced property ownership through shell companies back to Won-shik's organization. Then they started watching the building's residents, trying to determine who was important enough to justify this level of protection. They identified Essence and Maya as the only residents who received specific security attention, discrete surveillance teams that followed them, security protocols that protected their movements, resources allocated specifically to their safety. Volkov leadership made assessment: Won-shik had personal attachment to this woman and child. Targeting them would create leverage for negotiations about territorial disputes. Won-shik's intelligence network identified Volkov's surveillance before they could act on their assessment. But the discovery came with realization: his protection of Essence had created exactly the vulnerability Minho had warned about. Volkov knows, Minho reported during emergency meeting. They've identified Essence Perez and her daughter as your priority protection targets. They're planning to use them as leverage. What's their timeline? Unknown. But their surveillance has been active for 2 weeks. They're gathering information about patterns, vulnerabilities, optimal approach for abduction or threat. Increase security immediately. Full protective detail, 24-hour surveillance, eliminate any opportunity for Volkov to make move. Sir, increasing security will be obvious to Ms. Perez. She'll notice armed men following her. She'll ask questions about why she needs protection. This situation requires informing her about the threat. I'm not informing her that she's in danger because I've been obsessively protecting her for 8 months. You don't have a choice. If Volkov makes move and she's not prepared, she and her daughter could be hurt. If you warn her, she can take precautions and cooperate with security measures. Those are your options. Inform her or accept risk that your protection fails because she's not aware she needs protecting. Won-shik knew Minho was right. But informing Essence meant revealing everything: the building purchase, the neighborhood restructuring, the 8 months of hidden protection, the obsessive focus on her safety. It meant admitting he'd been surveilling and protecting someone who had no idea he existed beyond brief coffee shop interaction. Arrange a meeting. Secure location, discreet approach. I'll inform her about the situation. What are you going to tell her? I've been obsessively protecting you for 8 months and now my rivals have discovered that obsession and plan to use you as leverage? Something like that. I'll figure out the exact wording when I see her. The meeting was arranged for the next evening. Won-shik's people approached Essence as she was leaving work, explained that someone needed to speak with her urgently about her safety and her daughter's safety. She was immediately suspicious. Who are you? Why would someone need to talk to me about safety? We work security for a private firm. There's a credible threat to you and your daughter. Someone who can explain the situation is waiting to meet with you. Please come with us, your daughter is already being secured by our other team. You have my daughter? What the hell? She's safe. She's with trusted personnel at your apartment. But you both need protection, and the person coordinating that protection needs to explain the situation directly. Essence clearly wanted to refuse, but concern for Maya's safety overrode her suspicion. She went with one chick's people to the secure location, a private room at one of his legitimate businesses. One chick was waiting when she arrived. She recognized him immediately. You. From the coffee shop. What is this? Why do you have people taking my daughter and telling me I'm in danger? Please sit down. I'll explain everything, but it's complex and you need to understand the full situation. I'm not sitting down until you tell me where my daughter is and why your people approached me like I'm in some kind of criminal situation. Maya is at your apartment with protective security. She's safe. You're both safe. But you're both in danger because of me, and I need to explain how that happened so you can make informed decisions about how to proceed. Essence sat down, clearly furious but willing to hear the explanation. Start talking. One chick explained everything. The coffee shop encounter 8 months ago. His decision to investigate her background. Discovery of the problems with her building. The purchase of the Riverside apartment specifically to improve security for her and Maya. He explained the neighborhood restructuring, the elimination of criminal elements, the extensive resources allocated to creating safe environment around her. And he explained Volkov's discovery of his protection, their assessment that she represented vulnerability, their plan to use her as leverage. You've been stalking me, Essence said when he finished. For 8 months. You bought my building, restructured my neighborhood, deployed surveillance, all without my knowledge or consent. That's stalking. I was protecting you. Without my consent. You decided I needed protection and you implemented comprehensive security without ever asking if I wanted your protection. That's not protection, that's control disguised as concern. I was preventing threats you weren't aware of. Because you were the one aware of them. You're the one in criminal operations that create rivalries that threaten innocent people. You created the danger by being involved in my life, and now you're presenting yourself as my protector from threats that exist because of you. That's accurate but incomplete. The threats exist regardless of my involvement. Your building had dangerous tenants before I bought it. Your neighborhood had gang activity before I restructured it. I didn't create those threats, I eliminated them. And created new threats by making me a target for your rivals. You've made my life more dangerous while telling yourself you were protecting me. Volkov wouldn't have identified you if I'd implemented the protection differently. That's my error and I'm correcting it now by informing you and offering enhanced security until the threat is neutralized. I don't want your protection. I want you out of my life. I want you to stop surveilling me, stop controlling my neighborhood, stop involving me in your criminal operations. That's not possible. Volkov knows you matter to me. Walking away now leaves you vulnerable to retaliation I can prevent. Whether you want my protection or not, you need it. I needed it before you created the threat. Now I need it because you've made me a target. That's not protection, that's creating problems and then offering solutions as if you're my savior. What do you want me to do? I can't undo 8 months of protection. I can't make Volkov forget you exist. I can only address the current threat and try to ensure you and Maya stay safe. I want you to leave us alone. Neutralize your rival's threat without involving me, then withdraw your protection and let me live my life without criminal operations hovering in the background. I can neutralize Volkov's threat. But withdrawing protection entirely leaves you vulnerable to future threats. The building security, the neighborhood improvements, those need to stay in place. The building security can stay if it's managed by someone other than you. Sell the building to a legitimate owner who'll maintain the improvements. Withdraw your surveillance. Let me and Maya have normal life. One chick knew she was right to demand this. But the thought of withdrawing protection entirely, of not knowing whether she was safe, was intolerable. I'll neutralize the Volkov threat. I'll restructure the building ownership to distance it from my operations. But I'm not withdrawing security entirely until I'm confident you're not at ongoing risk. That's non-negotiable. You don't get to decide what's non-negotiable in my life. I'm telling you what I want. And I'm telling you what I can provide. Complete withdrawal isn't possible until the threat landscape changes. Partial withdrawal with discrete ongoing security is what I can offer. That's still controlling my life without my consent. That's ensuring you survive to make your own choices instead of becoming casualty in conflicts you didn't ask to be part of. I'm sorry I involved you through my obsessive protection. But I'm not sorry enough to leave you unprotected when threats exist. Essence looked at him with obvious fury and frustration. How long? How long before you consider the threat landscape safe enough to withdraw? I don't know. Months, maybe longer. But I'll be as discreet as possible and I'll keep you informed about threat assessments so you understand why protection continues. This is insane. I met you once at a coffee shop and now I'm trapped in protective security because you decided 8 months ago that I needed your protection. I know. If I could undo the obsession I would. But I can't. So I'm managing the consequences and trying to keep you safe despite my terrible judgment about how to implement protection. You need therapy. This level of obsessive focus on protecting someone you met briefly suggests serious psychological issues. Probably. But therapy doesn't address the immediate threat from Volkov. Security does. Can we agree on temporary protection until that threat is eliminated? Essence clearly wanted to refuse. But concern for Maya's safety overrode her anger about one chick's obsessive behavior. Temporary protection. Discreet, non-intrusive, focused solely on eliminating the threat from your rivals. Once that's resolved, you withdraw completely and sell the building to someone who won't surveil the residents. Agreed. I'll neutralize Volkov and then withdraw as much as possible while maintaining minimum security that keeps you safe. And you stop buying buildings and restructuring neighborhoods around me. Whatever happens next, I'm not becoming center of more obsessive protection operations. Agreed. No more building purchases or neighborhood restructuring. Just minimum necessary security until threats are eliminated. They'd reached temporary agreement, but Essence's fury was clear. One chick had created exactly the situation Minho had warned about. His obsessive protection had made Essence a target, forced him to reveal his surveillance, and destroyed any possibility of relationship beyond hostile security arrangement. Neutralizing the Volkov threat took 3 weeks of strategic operations that one chick conducted with singular focus. He couldn't just eliminate Volkov's people who'd conducted surveillance, that would trigger retaliation against Essence. He needed to eliminate their interest in using her as leverage entirely. His approach was comprehensive. Demonstrate that targeting Essence would result in catastrophic consequences for Volkov, while simultaneously offering them alternative concessions that made pursuing her as leverage strategically unwise. He arranged meeting with Volkov leadership. Made clear that any move against Essence or Maya would result in total war, not strategic conflict over territory, but complete elimination of Volkov's operations in the Pacific Northwest. You've identified someone I'm protecting, one chick said during the negotiation. You've calculated that targeting her gives you leverage. I'm telling you that calculation is wrong. Targeting her results in your organization ceasing to exist. That's not negotiable or exaggerated. Test it and discover I'm serious. You're threatening war over one woman? That's irrational. It's completely rational from my perspective. She and her daughter are under my protection. Threatening them demonstrates you don't understand my priorities. I'm clarifying those priorities now so you can make informed decisions. What do you want? If we agree not to target her, what concessions do we get in return? One chick offered territorial and operational concessions he'd been refusing for months: access to operations, revenue sharing, influence over decisions he'd previously controlled exclusively. Those are substantial concessions. Why offer them now when you wouldn't consider them before? Because maintaining peace costs less than fighting war over someone you've threatened. Take the concessions and leave Essence Perez alone, or refuse the concessions and discover what happens when you target someone under my protection. Your choice. Volkov took the concessions. The threat to Essence was neutralized through combination of overwhelming threat and strategic compromise. One chick informed Essence of the resolution during meeting at her apartment, first time he'd been in her personal space, made him acutely aware of how intrusive his previous surveillance had been. Volkov has agreed to leave you alone. They won't target you or Maya. The immediate threat is eliminated. What did you give them? What did protecting me cost your organization? Territorial concessions I'd been refusing. Revenue sharing, operational influence, some control over decisions I'd previously monopolized. You gave up power to keep us safe. I gave up power to eliminate threat my protection created. Don't romanticize it as noble sacrifice, it's just consequence management for my obsessive behavior. What happens now? You promised to withdraw protection once the threat was eliminated. I'm restructuring building ownership to distance it from my operations. The Riverside Apartments will be owned by a legitimate property management company that will maintain the security improvements without the surveillance I implemented. That reduces my direct involvement while maintaining safe environment. And the neighborhood? All the properties you bought? Those will be gradually divested to legitimate owners. The process will take months, but the end result is that I won't control your neighborhood. What about surveillance? Are you going to stop watching me? One chick hesitated. This was the question he'd been avoiding because the honest answer would prove he couldn't completely withdraw. I'm eliminating the cameras in your building and the discrete surveillance teams. But I'm maintaining minimum monitoring of threats to your safety. Not surveillance of you specifically, but awareness of potential dangers in your vicinity. That's still surveillance. That's still you monitoring my life without consent. It's security awareness that ensures I can respond if new threats emerge. I'm not watching your activities. I'm watching for people who might target you. There's a difference. The difference is semantic. You're still maintaining presence in my life without my consent. I'm maintaining capability to protect you if necessary. After 8 months of obsessive protection, I can't just completely withdraw and pretend I don't care whether you're safe. This is minimum I can accept. What I can accept is you leaving me alone entirely. Selling the building to someone else, divesting the neighborhood properties, stopping all monitoring regardless of how you frame it. That's what I want. I understand that's what you want. But I can't provide it. Complete withdrawal feels like abandoning you to potential threats. I need minimum awareness to maintain my peace of mind. Your peace of mind isn't my responsibility. You created this situation through obsessive behavior. Fixing it requires actually withdrawing, not just reducing the level of surveillance and calling it protection. I'm sorry. I can't withdraw completely. I can only reduce to minimum necessary monitoring that lets me sleep at night knowing you're not in danger I could prevent. Essence looked at him with obvious frustration. You're never going to leave us alone, are you? You're always going to be in the background, monitoring and protecting whether I want it or not. I'll be as discreet as possible. You won't notice my presence unless there's actual threat. But yes, I'm going to maintain awareness of your safety. I can't turn off the obsession completely just because you've demanded I withdraw. That's not healthy. For you or for me. You need help dealing with obsessive protective behavior. Probably. But I need to ensure you're safe more than I need to address my psychological issues. So the protection continues in reduced form and I accept that makes me problematic protector you never asked for. Over the following year, one chick kept his promise to reduce his involvement in Essence's life while maintaining minimum security awareness. He sold the Riverside Apartments to a legitimate property management company that maintained the security improvements. He divested the neighborhood properties gradually. He eliminated the intrusive surveillance. But he maintained awareness of Essence's safety through his intelligence network. Not direct surveillance, but monitoring of threats that might affect her, ensuring he could respond if danger emerged. Essence noticed the reduced presence. The building was still secure but without the sense that someone specific was watching. The neighborhood continued improving but without obvious single entity controlling everything. She also noticed that one chick appeared occasionally. Not intrusively, just present in her vicinity often enough to be noticeable. She'd see him at the coffee shop where they'd first met. At the grocery store near her building. At Maya's school events that were public but that he had no obvious reason to attend. He was maintaining discreet presence that allowed him to monitor her safety without conducting intrusive surveillance. After 6 months of this pattern, Essence confronted him directly. She approached him at the coffee shop where he was sitting alone, clearly timing his visit to coincide with when she'd be there. "You're not as discreet as you think. I notice you showing up in places where I am. I notice you maintaining presence even though you promised to withdraw. I promised to reduce surveillance and eliminate intrusive monitoring. I didn't promise to completely disappear from your life. Why? Why can't you just let me go and move on? You've eliminated the threats, you've reduced your control, you've done what I asked. Why continue appearing in my life? Because I can't stop caring whether you're safe. I've tried. I've attempted to convince myself that reduced monitoring is adequate. But I can't turn off the compulsion to ensure you're okay. So I maintain presence that lets me confirm your safety without conducting active surveillance. That's still obsessive behavior. You need professional help. I know. But professional help doesn't eliminate the obsession immediately. In the meantime, I'm managing it by maintaining discreet presence instead of intrusive control. That's progress even if it's not complete resolution." Essence sat down across from him. "Can I ask you something honestly?" "Always." "Why me? You met me once at a coffee shop. I was just someone you helped during a confrontation. Why did that interaction create 8 months of obsessive protection and ongoing inability to withdraw?" One chick thought about that question. "I don't have good answer. You impressed me. You were willing to intervene to protect someone being mistreated despite obvious risk. You were raising Maya alone and doing it well despite difficult circumstances. Something about that combination made me want to ensure you were protected and provided for." That's not normal response to brief interaction. I know it's not normal. I know my response was disproportionate and obsessive. But it happened and I can't undo it. I can only manage it better than I did initially. What do you want from me? Long term, what's the goal of this continued presence? I don't want anything from you beyond permission to ensure you're safe. I'm not seeking relationship or gratitude or acknowledgement. I just want to know you and Maya are okay and that threats are being addressed before they become dangerous. That's not sustainable long term. Eventually I'm going to move, or I'm going to start dating someone, or something will change that makes your monitoring impossible or inappropriate. What happens then? Then I adapt. If you move, I ensure your new location is safe. If you start dating someone, I withdraw to accommodate that relationship while maintaining minimum awareness. Whatever changes, I'll adjust my approach to respect those changes. You're describing permanent fixture in my life that I never agreed to. I'm describing permanent commitment to your safety that exists whether you agreed to it or not. I'm sorry that's uncomfortable. But it's reality I've created through my obsessive behavior and that I'm managing as best I can." Essence looked at him for a long moment. "I can't decide if you're the most dedicated protector I've never asked for or if you're stalker with resources who's rationalized surveillance as protection. Probably both. I have obsessive protective behavior that manifests as comprehensive security. Whether that's protection or stalking depends on perspective and on whether threats I'm protecting against are real." The threats were real. Volkov was real danger. But ongoing monitoring feels like you're creating justification for continued presence rather than actually addressing specific threats. There are always potential threats in my world. Rivals, law enforcement, conflicts that could create collateral damage. My monitoring identifies those threats before they affect you. That's valuable even if it's also manifestation of obsessive behavior. I don't know what to do with you. You've been honest about your obsession. You've reduced your control. You're maintaining discreet presence instead of intrusive surveillance. But you're still in my life without full consent and I don't know how to make you leave without creating hostility that might make things worse. You don't make me leave. You accept that I'm permanent background presence who's committed to your safety. If that becomes intolerable, you tell me and I'll find ways to be even more discreet. But I won't disappear completely. That's not reassuring. It's honest. I'd rather be honest about my limitations than promise complete withdrawal I can't deliver. 3 years after buying her building and restructuring her neighborhood, one chick had achieved uneasy equilibrium with Essence. She'd accepted that he was permanent presence in her life, discreet, generally non-intrusive, focused on security rather than control. He maintained awareness of her safety, responded to threats before they became dangerous, provided resources when she needed them without expecting gratitude or relationship. It wasn't healthy attachment. It wasn't normal protective relationship. But it was sustainable arrangement that kept Essence and Maya safe while giving Essence agency about her life that one chick's initial obsessive protection had violated. Do you think this is permanent? Essence asked during one of their occasional conversations at the coffee shop that had become their neutral meeting ground. You maintaining presence in my life indefinitely? Yes. Unless you find a way to make me stop that doesn't require hostility or conflict. This is permanent commitment I've made to your safety. Maya is 7 now. She's going to start noticing that the same man keeps appearing at her school events and in places where we are. How do I explain you to my daughter? Tell her I'm someone who knew her mother and who wants to ensure she's safe. That's true without being complicated. She's going to ask why you care about her safety. Then tell her I care because her mother was kind to someone who needed help and that impressed me enough to want to protect her family. That's also true. You're okay with Maya knowing you exist as protective presence in our lives? I'm okay with Maya knowing whatever you're comfortable explaining. My presence isn't secret, it's just discreet. If explaining it to her makes you more comfortable, explain it however you think is appropriate. 5 years after first seeing her at a coffee shop, one chick had built life structured entirely around ensuring Essence and Maya's safety. He still ran his organization, still managed criminal operations throughout the Pacific Northwest. But his primary focus was the security perimeter around 2 people who'd become the center of his existence. Is it worth it? Minho asked during one of their strategic meetings. 5 years of obsessive focus on protecting one woman and her child? The resources, the strategic concessions, the permanent commitment to monitoring their safety? Yes. Completely worth it. I built something meaningful beyond just criminal power. That has value regardless of whether Essence ever sees me as anything other than problematic protector she never asked for. What if she eventually demands you actually leave? What if she moves somewhere you can't monitor or creates a situation where your presence becomes truly impossible? Then I adapt. I've invested 5 years in ensuring their safety. I'm not abandoning that commitment because the monitoring becomes more difficult. I'll find ways to maintain awareness regardless of circumstances. That's obsession, not protection. It's both. I've accepted that my attachment to their safety is unhealthy. But it's also real and it's permanent and it's making them safer than they'd be without my protection. Those things coexist and I'm managing all of them as best I can. 10 years after buying her building, one chick was still maintaining his discreet presence in Essence's life. Maya was 12, aware that Mr. One was someone who appeared regularly in their lives and who her mother said was ensuring their safety. Essence had built career advancement and financial stability partially through resources one chick had anonymously provided. Neither of them loved him. Neither had asked for his protection. But both benefited from his obsessive commitment to their safety in ways that made his presence valuable despite its uncomfortable origins. Do you regret it? Essence asked during one of their conversations. 10 years of dedicating your life to protecting people who've never reciprocated your feelings or asked for your protection? Never. What I built protecting you and Maya is more meaningful than anything else in my life. That has value regardless of whether you see me as anything other than obsessive protector. I see you as someone who can't let go but who's managed his obsession better than most people would. That's something, even if it's not normal or healthy. I'll take that. It's better than being seen as dangerous stalker. You are dangerous stalker. You're just stalker who's kept us safe for 10 years. Both things are true. They'd proven that obsession could manifest as protection if managed carefully, that buying an entire building could be rational response when ensuring someone's safety required eliminating all uncontrolled variables, that some attachments persist regardless of reciprocation because the protector can't turn off their compulsion to ensure safety. The woman who impressed him once and became the center of his existence. The obsessive protector who restructured a neighborhood to keep her safe. Both of them building life from his obsession, proving that protection without consent can be both valuable and problematic, and some commitments persist for decades because the alternative, walking away and accepting you don't know whether they're safe, is intolerable regardless of whether the attachment is healthy. Protection becomes obsession when you can't separate genuine security needs from compulsive monitoring. One Shik Kyung met Essence Perez once at a coffee shop. She impressed him by standing up to someone bullying a barista. That single interaction created 8 months of obsessive protection that included buying her apartment building, restructuring her entire neighborhood, and deploying comprehensive surveillance to ensure her safety. That obsession created exactly the vulnerability it was designed to prevent. His rivals identified his attachment, targeted Essence as leverage, forced him to reveal his hidden protection and confront the consequences of his behavior. Their story proves that protection without consent is still violation even when motivated by genuine concern for safety. One Chick eliminated real threats to Essence's well-being. The building improvements, the neighborhood restructuring, the removal of dangerous tenants, all of that made her life safer. But he did it without her knowledge or consent, surveilling her for months while telling himself it was protection rather than stalking. The revelation destroyed any possibility of relationship beyond hostile security arrangement. Essence was right to be furious about his violation of her privacy and autonomy. His protection came with costs, loss of privacy, involvement in his criminal conflicts, permanent presence in her life she'd never agreed to. It also proves that obsession can be managed but rarely eliminated entirely. One Chick reduced his surveillance, eliminated intrusive monitoring, gave Essence more control over her life. But he couldn't completely withdraw because his compulsion to ensure her safety was permanent. That partial withdrawal was better than nothing. It gave Essence agency while maintaining security that kept her safe from threats she wouldn't have been able to address alone. Most importantly, their story demonstrates that some attachments persist regardless of reciprocation or appropriateness. One Chick spent 10 years protecting someone who never asked for protection, never reciprocated his feelings, never saw him as anything other than problematic protector she'd been forced to accept. He did it anyway because the alternative, walking away and accepting he wouldn't know whether she was safe, was intolerable despite being the healthy choice. The protector who couldn't let go because ensuring safety became his entire purpose. The woman who accepted unwanted protection because refusing it would have made her less safe. Both of them proving that obsession and protection coexist uncomfortably when someone decides another person's safety matters more than their own psychological health or the target's clearly expressed preferences. If you love this story, hit that like button and subscribe for more stories about protection becoming obsession, buildings purchased to eliminate uncontrolled variables, and commitments that persist for decades because walking away feels like abandonment even when staying is clearly unhealthy. Comment below, would you want someone restructuring your neighborhood to protect you without your knowledge? Or would you prefer to accept higher risk in exchange for privacy and autonomy? Share your thoughts. Thanks for watching, and remember, protection without consent is still violation even when motivated by genuine concern. The healthiest response to wanting someone safe is asking if they want your help, not implementing comprehensive security before they know you're doing it. Some obsessions can be managed but never fully resolved. The best you can do is reduce their intrusiveness while acknowledging they'll never completely disappear. Until next time.